Let me know if you need any assistance with the slides, Purna.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out my, yeah, here you go.
Perfect. Yes, we can see.
Yeah.
Great.
So I think you can see it clearly. Yeah, okay. So, namaskar. Hello. My name is Purna and I am an Asian woman, about 5 feet 5 inches tall, and I have a British complexion and I have a black hair. So we built repair community in a city called Bengaluru. So here you can see there are two old, in this picture, there are two old gentlemen who are sitting. So they are basically repair persons. And there is a sack of metal sticks are lying on the table, which is actually umbrella sticks which are salvaged from old umbrellas. So our repair persons are really very sustainable, and this whole street where I have taken this picture, this is one of the oldest neighborhood, and uh, uh, this person is still on using the hand skills, making repairing the keys and the umbrellas, while the others have moved to computerized key making. So India is a repair country, and we have built a community of repair in this country. So I'm now specifically talking about Bengaluru city. So space was never a constraint for us, and it's a place for creativity, and it's a place which excites us. As you can see, we are doing this cycle repair workshop for children in a roadside, in a upcoming area in Bangalore. Um, and you can see a lot of children are, everybody is busy, everybody are busy in fixing the cycles. There are times that the cycles are quite important and important asset for people, for these children, because I have observed that after repairing their cycles, I have seen them many times distributing newspapers in the neighborhoods, or sometimes carrying grain sacks. So the children, some of the children, they used to come only to maintain their cycle. They are not interested exactly in maintaining activities, but they are interested in maintaining their important asset. So there was a boy once who actually put 14 patches to give a last chance to his tire. So this kind of commitment was there, and we were quite excited by the enthusiasm of the children. So we feel that we saw the children as ambassadors, and they have never failed us, because we have done this kind of workshops across the resident welfare associations, in parks, in schools, and so on and so forth. Space is also an opportunity for us to connect. As in this picture, this is a basement of a hospital where we used to conduct our training programs, and the management was quite pro to all this. And there is a thrift store in this basement, so we had a very good opportunity to do this kind of workshop. And you can see the volunteers who are young, old, and there are visitors who have come to repair their things. So here people have actually made friends with strangers. They have met with each other. So the community of volunteers were growing slowly and steadily. So this is around 2017-18 that I'm talking about in Bangalore city. So Repair Cafe Collective, the driving force behind Repair Cafe Collective was always the volunteers, and these volunteers have come from all walks of life. We did a lot of activities like mending clothes, cobbling, making plastic bags, stitching them together, learn soldering skills, repaired umbrellas, and so on and so forth. Here in these workshops, the volunteers used to come. We used to plan things, because we are more interested in sharing the practical side of the knowledge, because this is a new kind of platform. Nobody has seen it before. So people have come from all walks of life, like the housewives have come, people who are, technocrats, who are technical people, children, teenagers, everybody has joined for this purpose, and we were quite thrilled with the kind of response. So this is another project. So we have then tried another project which is of a different scale. So this was waste art therapy, which we did, and this was funded by Burning Man project. And this project was of a different scale. Now I am not talking about right now about Repair Cafe activities, but the same Repair Cafe team, we moved on to another community space, and we did a new experiment, and which we are quite proud of, because we worked with the therapy with the dementia patients, and we connected with neuropsychologists, we connected with doctors, we connected with patients, we connected with senior citizens and people who are really volunteers and who are quite motivated for this cause. So here there is a picture of a patient that is being made from old CD covers and broken tiles, and the planning and the constituting and making and everything is being done in the workshops, where everybody has come together and artists have curated. So this was this project was called as Waste Art Therapy. So in this picture, there is a couple of a lot of people are working together. Basically, there is a process going on where people are painting the bottles, and these bottles will soon go to be in a installation in a park. And we did this kind of exhibition in couple of parks in the vicinity, and also at the end of the day, we made a small corridor in a hospital, which was a workshop space now for the dementia patients. So as you can see, with the help of patients and other volunteers, we have created these art installation, and I can show you. And as in this picture, there's a group of people. Now, as I told you, the volunteers came from, so this project was of a different scale. The volunteers came from all walks of life. So you can see medical professionals, you can, there are medical professionals who have joined, there are youngsters who have joined, there are senior citizens and even patients. So everybody came together. So this is, in this picture, people are actually installing these artifacts in the park. So we did in quite a different places, and this project went for a span of a year. So every 3 months we used to do one workshop with the help of these volunteers. So this is primarily a loose collective of volunteers, and of course children are also participating into this. As you can, in this picture, there is a group of children. So these children are from a neighborhood in the hospital where we used to work, and they used to observe us every day doing this, and eventually they joined us, and we also observed, and when we discussed with the psychologists and the doctors, we observed that the mood of the overall workshop of the patients have improved when the children has joined. And this was something which was not very directly seen, but we have actually seen the improvement in the work of the patients when they have taken more interest in their projects and they wanted to do it, because they generally they normally will have mood swings and things like that, which is not, which is not I mean, we don't know why it is happening, but overall the children has raised the energy levels. So again, as I was mentioning, the children has again and again has become ambassador of our different projects. So earlier, the first project you saw, that when we worked as a repair cafe, repair based workshops, when we worked in the city, there we found children as ambassador of our work, and again in this workshop we found children as ambassadors. So there are two factors which are constantly, and of course there's one more, but I can talk about the first two. The first one was the children as ambassadors. The second one was the space as a medium of interaction, the space as a medium of connecting with people. So this is a small corridor in a hospital where we converted this space into a workshop. So they are painting old, a wood kind of thing, and they're creating a product from art installation. This is our third project in which suddenly the nature of the space has changed. As I said, the space was a constant dynamics, the children was a constant dynamics, and the volunteers was a constant dynamics. Here the dynamics of the space have changed. We moved to online. This is during the corona time, the COVID times. We were struggling to find people, and we discovered this new place, and this is the virtual space which become a different medium for us, and we were not prepared, but very soon we accustomed ourselves into this. So Tinker Kinder was the program, and by the way, this name also had come from our online community of fixers, which we made when I met in the FixFest conferences. And there are many brainstorming happened about the names like fixing, fixers, and fix, Tinker Kinder, and so on and so forth. So Tinker Kinder was the name which was taken. So we are getting a continuous support from different communities around us who are helping us to put these things together. And we are new in this space, so we are continuously reinventing ourselves. As you can see, the children are sharing their assignment which they have done. So they have so this child is repairing a hole in a cloth bag. So his father has shared this picture. This was an assignment. So they have done all the home maintenance assignment, and we have conducted some interactive sessions. They have done maintaining their cycles. They have done cleaning of the aerator, and they have very proudly shared their experience, what they have done. And this is they are doing while sitting at home. So they are actually doing home maintenance sitting at home, which was a new experience for them. So all the volunteers, we came together, we shared, when I say homeowners, primarily I am referring to the volunteers who are very proud of maintaining their homes. So they have done a lot of hard work, and it's like for the last 15 years they're only doing this, and this is a platform where they can actually now share their experience. So we created a content which was purely out of a practical knowledge, and we wanted to stay away from the theory part of it. We wanted to share the practical side of it so that it can be made use and children can quickly get into the repairing mode, which was difficult to get nowadays because since they are more into theory subjects. So this was an attempt, and believe me, this attempt was still going on, and children and their parents, they have wholeheartedly accepted this. So and I was surprised to know during conducting of this program that the parents who are following Repair Cafe activities on various platforms like the social media and other websites, they are the one who have first recommended their children for this program. So somehow the community is following you, and I mean, we really feel very gratitude, and we shared our thanks to our patrons, and we shared our feeling because they said that we regret that we could not join your programs, but this is one way of sort of participating in your program. So we felt quite confident. So depending on the experiences which I shared with you, so here are 3 factors which I felt was quite important, which I have shared and explained. So first is the ambassadors. So we found children as ambassadors for building the repair or a maintenance community. Space as a means, so space as an opportunity for us. We have adopted it because we want to continue doing our workshops across, and we don't want to feel constrained. So we did at any possible location, and even volunteers don't shy away from doing it. And the third is the loose collective of like-minded people who have joined us eventually, and they became the volunteers. In fact, I would like to share with one of the examples of a couple who once joined in one of the workshops, and the husband ended up repairing a swing machine, which was a new thing in our workshops. And the wife told us that she actually searched us online when we literally don't have any presence online. And she wanted to suggest it to her husband because he is a serious fixer. So there was a smile on all of our face. and they have now become part of the core team. Now, again, for the purpose of this graph, there is one window which is X, and this window is still an unknown window because we still are not a formal entity. We are a loose collective of people who are working and who are trying to build up this community. And we actually did some good workshops in Bangalore. We are quite proud of it. So I would now open this session to the audience, and I would like you to share your examples. If you have also seen these factors working in your life when you're trying to work in a community building project or when you're wanting to contribute somewhere. So I would request you if you could kindly share your experience in the chat box, and I would love to read one or two, or maybe as the time permits, and would like to would like to share. So Liliana, can I give like 2 minutes?
Yes, that's great. We'll write
Yeah.
into the chat.
Yeah, so can I give everyone, including myself, 2 minutes to please share these three factors, or any of one of them or two, or maybe if you have felt otherwise. Just share your experience in the chat box, and I would love to go through them and understand, because that would be an interesting observation. Thank you so much. Liliana, my message is clear, or?
Yes, that's
Yeah,
clear.
thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So feel free to put in other experiences that you've had in observing the engagement of kids, utilizing spaces, and building a sense of collective.
So I'll start reading them after a while. I'll just wait for 2 minutes. I mean, you have to tell me, because,
We have about 1 more minute.
yeah, sure.
So Purna, just to clarify, A is
Yes.
ambassadors, O is opportunity, and C is consensus.
Yes. So I'll go back to the earlier slide.
Yeah. I can just put it in the chat, so that's fine.
Yeah. Yes.
Mm. Mm. These are wonderful.
Should I?
Yeah. Do you want to read a few out and then we can
Yeah. Just one or two.
Yeah.
One or two I found
Yeah.
very interesting. I was just reading quickly. So here is Michael Fisher, and he actually raised a very important question. He said, "I moved to a current community, and I know some community spaces I have a lot of difficult time. I appreciate the idea of loose collective, but I am also curious about how to avoid cliques and intimidation for new people to join in, like what you shared about the children. Yes, observing and then joining in the parks project. Yes. So I would just quickly like to give few instances. Well, we have also we have also faced these kind of fictions and this kind of intimidations, and we have to work very hard towards to tell people that we are not here to judge each other, and let's focus on the cause. Let's try to repair things. And so there has been like people who are doing this, but somehow eventually the people who found a comfort in our projects, they joined in, and people who could not found a comfort, they left us. So I guess the situation becomes clearer and clearer as they spend more time. So some many times I leave it on to the judgment of the people, that you decide what you want to do, and I don't like to push people. I don't force, and as a team also we don't force anybody, and we really appreciate, and we really take their conditions into consideration when we try to program, because there are many times that in the program they are not able to turn out because something has happened or whatever. So we don't judge them. We say, okay, fine, thank you so much, but we have to move on. So but we have to find an alternative. If all these things didn't work, then what will happen? So we are always ready with an alternative, because I know I have faced this kind of problem in a formal setup. So I'm more very conscious, and as a team also, we are very conscious on these aspects. But these are very difficult to achieve. So I guess the time will heal. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Purna. This was
Yeah.
a wonderful presentation, and we will capture the responses that you all had
Yes.
in the chat. So please, if you have other ideas of ways that you've
Yeah. So I'll just
yes, back to you.
So I'll just quickly end up the program, this presentation of mine. And so next week I am now going to another new city, and again we are through community building. We are trying to we have actually kept ourselves a goal of conducting a repair cafe workshop for children, and hopefully it will work out. So the planning is on, and hopefully so tomorrow is another new day, and we'll try it again. And that's how we live on. Thank you so much. And please search for us online. We are called as Repair Cafe Bangalore or Repair Cafe Bengaluru. And please spread the word about our work, because we always want more and more participation of people to make our workshops happen. Thank you so much. Namaskar.
Thank you so much, Purna. This was really beautiful. I was taking some notes as well of the different forms of maintaining community that you spoke about during your presentation. So putting those into the chat now. And if you could stop sharing your screen, we'll pass it on to Shelby. Let me switch that over, remove spotlight. Awesome. Great. Okay, Shelby, over to you. Thank you again, Purna. Oh, I think you're on mute.
I'm unmuted now, and I was indeed muted. But there were so many great examples of accommodations and disability inclusion. So we can move right into this next section. I am so pleased to represent All Kinds. My name is Shelby Sire. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I use identity first language when talking about my disabilities and chronic illnesses. So that just means that I like to be referred to as a disabled person rather than a person with a disability. Let's see, to offer a quick visual description of myself to those who may have access needs related to sight or for anyone who's not looking at the screen, I am a white woman with blonde hair, and I'm wearing a striped red shirt with a bit of ruffles on it, and I have a red lip today. And then my background is just plain white doors. And I'm the founder of All Kinds. I'm just so thrilled to join you all and talk about maintenance and accessibility and access needs. And on this slide, to offer again another visual description, we have some All Kinds branding, including open hands in warm hues with thin blue flowers tracing the palm lines, and it says maintenance and accessibility. All right, so ableism is the assumption that all bodies should meet certain criteria or perform in a certain way. And it's just these standards that are either taught or learned that perhaps don't belong to us. So how should a body perform during a virtual gathering such as this? Maybe we should try for a moment to abandon some of the standards that we have to work under the guise of professionalism. So let's take a moment of self-maintenance. Everyone has access needs. Are you exhausted? And do you need to perhaps lay down at this very moment? You should absolutely do that. Or do you need a bathroom break? Take one whenever, please. Do you focus better when scribbling or doodling or playing a game on your phone? You should start that right now. Don't worry about looking at the screen. Do you learn better when your camera's off or when you're humming to yourself or fidgeting? Please do those things. So if you have the capacity, just continue with self-maintenance throughout the rest of our time together as a means of practicing accessibility. I'm accommodating myself today by using a script, which is placed over here, and I have some water on hand, and I'm sitting down. And on this slide, we have more of the thin petaled flowers with large center bulbs, and then there's imperfect blobs behind them in warm hues. All right, so quickly, just a background on our practice, which is called All Kinds. We are a creative accommodations provider, meaning we create accessible solutions that are artful and that go above and beyond what is legally mandated or typically practiced. We do this through something called participatory design, which is a highly accessible process where the people that will be using the end results, such as a space or a policy or a program, are actually the people that are making decisions and that are included in the design and building process. We were founded in 2019. We've worked with over 30 organizations to date, such as wayfinding and a natural playscape with a forest. We do a lot with arts organizations. We do a lot with event organizing. We're currently auditing the plans of a brand new central public library, which is really cool and exciting. And then we do all sorts of audits and internal needs assessments and trainings with organizations and nonprofits of all size. The best way to work with us is to contact us when you're in the idea phase. That's the most generative way to create a foundation of accessibility. And we also find that adding in accessibility after the fact can be more expensive or more difficult or arduous. And then we have our headshots there. I am joined on the All Kinds team by Marcus Chafee, who is a white person with a graying beard, and they're wearing a tan sweater in their photo. And then there's me, and I'm wearing a blue dress in my photo. You can be further introduced to our work with a free resource that we offer, which is the Accessible Activism Guide. And it's a super long free resource that offers tons of free ideas on how to make your activism and spaces a little bit more accessible. An example of something we offer in that guide is to always create a smoking section so that people with chemical sensitivities aren't triggered or disabled at your events. So there's plenty of resources in there, and we invite you to check that out soon. And this is a screen grab of the first page of the Accessible Activism Guide, and it features photos of various people in the disability rights movement. Okay, so let's do some background to get us all prepped for different accessible maintenance practices that we can practice in our community. There's just so much richness in terms of theories and practices within the wonderful world of accommodations. But for our time together, let's start by simply defining disability. And there's many ways to do this. Disability is super elusive. It can be fluid. It can change at a moment's notice. It's always up to the individual to define how they experience and perceive disability. Disabilities can be temporary, they can be permanent, they can be sporadic, they can be variable and episodic. I really appreciate the health justice definition of body minds, which says that our body and our mind are always interconnected and they can't be separated. Finally, conditions, circumstances, and attitudes can be disabling. And this is a pin that's from my disability ephemera collection that says attitudes are the real disability, which is a joke about how sometimes the way people treat us or regard us can be disabling. Examples of conditions that are disabling include climate chaos. So when it's smoky out from a fire, you may become irritable or you may have respiratory symptoms. There are forces beyond us and that we're up against every day that create disabilities and disabling conditions. Next up, I really appreciate an Indigenous definition of disability that comes from a book called A Disability History of the United States by Kim E. Nielsen. And I quote, "In Indigenous cultures, disability occurred when someone lacked or had weak community relationships. Though individuals might experience impairment, disability would come only if or when a person was removed from or was unable to participate in community reciprocity." And reciprocity is all about mutual dependence, being able to participate in action or influence. Interdependence, it's all about maintenance and maintenance of communities and care. So by this definition, how do our choices and our policies and our practices disable others and disable entire communities? For example, many organizations and institutions and governments at large have abandoned COVID safety measures, which then creates more disabling conditions. And it makes it so that people are unable to safely participate in community reciprocity. Again, prisons by this definition are disabling because they remove the opportunity for reciprocity. So I hope that we're expanding how we conceive of and how we think of disability, because I think that aids in our actions. All right, so next I want to talk a little bit more about access needs, which I introduced just a bit ago during the moment of maintenance. These are the baseline tools and accommodations or rules or policies or supports that we need in order to communicate or participate or just to be ourselves wholly and completely. Every single person has access needs, regardless of disability identity. Sometimes they're just called preferences. Another way, so in the chat, if you want to kind of talk through some of your own access needs, you can absolutely do so. And I think Liliana is dropping a free takeaway resource that really goes more in depth about access needs and has a huge list of access needs from which you can use to inform your community spaces and your practices. Okay, so we propose at All Kinds that meeting each other's access needs is actually a core maintenance practice. And what do we mean by that? But first, I'll do a quick visual description. In the upper right, we have an imperfect blob that's just orange. And then below that is an imperfect round cutout of a Braille printout of a museum guide. And below that is an imperfect circle of a blue barrier-free entrance sign with the international symbol of accessibility. Okay, so there are endless examples of access needs, and many of them are quite common, like food, water, and sleep. These are non-negotiable access needs and ones that we all deserve and need to survive. Housing is an access need. Many of them additional examples include scent-free spaces, no fluorescent lighting, temperature regulation like air conditioning and heat, simply knowing what to expect before an event or before an experience, which is the accommodation of previewing, and we'll talk a little bit more about that soon. Clear expectations, clear communication, those are both examples of access needs. Visualizations of language and of ideas is an access need. And finally, plastic straws are an example of an access need. When people with mobility needs need to drink, they use plastic straws. Cool, so I'm going to breeze through the implementation because our takeaway resource kind of goes more in depth about this, but the maintainers has exemplified how to accommodate access needs by offering a little field in the Eventbrite sign up for this very event about saying your access needs. You can also start meetings or phone calls or emails by checking in and saying, hey, what do you need in order to best participate in this collaboration or in this space or in this experience? And I will say that sometimes this is a muscle that we need to work on together. And a lot of times people won't be able to name access needs of their own or of their community off the bat. But consistency is a core component of accessibility. So if you continue to practice collecting and implementing access needs, you'll find in a very exciting and generative way that your communities will get really, really good at identifying access needs, meeting access needs, and using access needs to inform decisions and the way you use resources and the way you build space and environments. So it's a very exciting process. All right. Okay, on this slide, we like to say at All Kinds that access is a human right best fueled by the collaborative. And then we have 3 photos from different events that we've hosted. So we really want to impart upon you that accommodations belong to all of us. One way to do so, and we're getting into a few examples here, is by creating an accessibility guide. And again, the maintainers showed you how to do this by creating the event guide for the event that we're currently in right now. And I'll be sending a few examples of these accessibility guides in Liliana's post-event email. And I think it'll be a little bit easier to understand what an accessibility guide is. But it basically just previews as much as possible about an event or space or program or practice. It should include photos and photo descriptions and measurements. It should let people know of the schedule, of what type of seating is available, any barriers or challenges that they may encounter, what they should wear, what the vibe is, what they may be asked to participate in, what's optional, what's not optional, things of that nature. And it should absolutely be beautiful. It should be artistic and vibrant and highly usable. Here's another example of just screen grabs from different accessibility guides we've made, where we previewed the slope to get into the space or the ramp, or here's a photo of the entrance and these are the measurements and here's how you get in. Great, okay, so next, we're introducing several ways of meeting access needs and practicing accessibility as maintenance. We really want to draw the comparison that a lack of maintenance or a lack of repair can actually create disabling conditions. So accessibility and maintenance are totally intertwined. On the far left here, we have an example of a ramp that has some cracks in it. In the US, under the Americans with Disabilities Act, a crack that is deeper or wider than 1/4 of an inch, and it's like this big, I'm showing it with my fingers, is actually considered a legal barrier. However, it's really easy, well, relatively easy, to get some DIY concrete mix and be a person or a collective that repairs cracks, because these can cause injury, people can trip, or it can cause a maintenance issue with mobility aids. So the ways in which we care for our environment are tremendously impactful. In the middle photo is an example of a path of travel that has a bush just kind of interjecting into the path of travel. There's a different way to say that, but simply, cutting back foliage or cutting back a bush to maintain a path of travel is a great act of accessible maintenance. Scooping the sidewalk, removing wet leaves from a path of travel, that is accessible maintenance that really makes a difference in our communities. So a lot of these things you're already doing, or you're already familiar with, or are quite easy to implement. On the far right, we have a photo of water damage. Just being on top of a leak and making sure that it doesn't form mold is a great act of collective care, because mold can be deeply disabling to many different disabilities. So a lot of these things you're probably already doing, but I hope that in reframing it, we can include the disability community at large in a significant way. Next up, and perhaps most urgently, shared air practices are a great and very urgent form of community accessible maintenance. And just, if you feel overwhelmed, remember that we have the tools and science to prevent disabling conditions from airborne viruses. A very exciting tool that you can create for less than $100 is called the Corsi Rosenthal box. That's on the far left, and it uses a box fan and furnace filters to create air quality, which is very exciting, and that prevents the spread of disabling disease. Additionally, if you're not already doing this, you can use a carbon emissions monitor to check the quality of your air and to know when it's time to ventilate and open windows or clear out a space. And finally, continuing to mask is a really loving and relatively easy act of community maintenance that makes sure that disabled people can still be in community with you in public spaces. All right, and then I want to shout out a few practitioners of collective accommodations. Again, accessibility belongs to all of us. All Kinds has nothing to do with them. We're just huge fans. The first is the Clean Air Club out of Chicago. They provide a family of rentable HEPA air purifiers that musicians can borrow to make their art more accessible. This is completely free, and it's a really successful and prominent program that people are really excited about and grateful for. Also in Chicago is the Chicago Ramp Share, and they just have like a collection of various sized super durable ramps that make spaces more accessible that anyone can rent and use. And this can be easily replicated in your community, and perhaps you have other ideas for accessible collective accommodations. And really, accessibility is a practice, it's not a destination. Again, it's all about consistency and reassessing and working with people to solve problems and best implement it. So I think I'm running over time, which I apologize for, but out of all of these ways of how to be an accomplice, I really want to point out one, which is leadership of the most impacted, which is a tenet from the disability justice movement. And I'll definitely send resources on that because it's a vital and beautiful and radical practice that we can all engage in. But that just means that you place disabled people as experts of their own needs and experiences, and that you compensate them for their time. And that can mean a lot of different things. Maybe you exchange their expertise for care work or running errands for them if you don't have monetary compensation. But really, the time is now to platform disabled people and to include us in your accessible solutions and maintenance routines. So I hope that this gave you just a tiny peek into the wonderful expansiveness of accessibility, and that you'll begin to accessibly maintain your communities through the usage of accessibility guides and shared air practices. And, just to end things, accessibility is vital, and it can be a little bit challenging at first. But as we mentioned, reciprocity pays out in beautiful ways, especially when creating the radically accessible world that we at All Kinds envision and work towards every day. So thank you so much for your time and for joining me in this marathon of getting as much information to you as possible. I will pass it on to the next person and look forward to any questions or thoughts about access needs during our Q&A. Thank you again.
Shelby, thank you so much for sharing. I am pasting in some notes. Again, we will be compiling everything from the chat as well as from the recording so that we have information in our takeaway document. So last but certainly not least is Kalmia to share about Public Space One. I'm going to add spotlight and remove Shelby. And yeah, thank you so much. We're really excited to hear from you, Kalmia. Over to you.
Thank you. It's actually like very humbling to be here. I feel I'm a big fan of what the maintainers are doing, and Shelby and Perna, hearing from you and learning from you is amazing. And yes, so thank you. So my name is Kalmia Strong. I use she, her pronouns. I am a white woman with dark brown hair and bangs, and dark rimmed glasses, wearing a denim button-up shirt, and I'm sitting sort of awkwardly in a corner with a wood paneled background behind me. I'm going to share my slideshow and so here we go. I am here to speak on behalf of Public Space One, which is a nonprofit arts and community organization in Iowa City, Iowa, in the US. And I am just part of a team, a community of people. But I wanted to share a little bit about myself as well, as the person presenting today, and thinking about maintaining community and creating it and maintaining it, and some of the practices that I've had before being a part of Public Space One. So this image is an image of me maybe 15 years ago. I think I can't remember. I think it looked the same maybe. And I'm standing next to a picnic table with a group of people looking at me as I point to something with some documents and objects on the picnic table. And then there's a body of water behind me. And this is a project that was called the Bumpkin Island Historical Society. And it's an example of the kind of work that I try to do as an individual and then often do through Public Space One, which is sort of points to one of the first strategies that I'll talk about, the tools that we use, which is, and this speaks very much to what Perna was sharing about adapting to spaces and thinking about what kind of space can you make? Does it matter if how long the space is going to be there, and like how can you use the space that you have, improve it, make it useful to have community in. And of course, we've all experienced this to another level during, as many of us who hadn't needed to be in virtual spaces as much, started to learn how to do that better, even though many people were already doing that at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. So this is one of the things that I try to do as an individual artist and creative organizer. And oops, another example of how I'm doing this is through publications, DIY publications like zines. This is 2 images. One is of a green piece of furniture that used to be a greeting card rack, but now is holding a bunch of different colorful paper publications on it that have lots of different images and words on them. And on the right, there's an image of 2 people's hands holding small paper publications. One of which I can't read except how, and one says "You are beautiful." So thinking about creating a space, and I'm mostly thinking about we're often thinking about physical spaces that both can gather. So as in the first project, gather people very temporarily. That was just a weekend space. And then this zine library, which I'm talking about here, it stays in our space, and there's no gathering around it, but as an anchor, it becomes a space where people are returning to, and they might run into each other, or there's actually some shared connection through the act of reading the same items that are in this library. So that's a little bit about me and what I do. Like I said, I'm here to represent Public Space One, and this image is a scan of a magazine called Little Village Magazine, and it's a newsprint publication. It says Little Village, Iowa City's news and culture magazine, free, September 2023, and it's got a photo of a brick storefront with a red awning that says Psychic Readings, and then a smaller window that says Public Space One, and has in red neon letters, and then the printed magazine text at the bottom says Public Space One, hyper creative idealist turned loose. And this is an image that is from before I was involved in our organization, but I like to show because it's funny and shows the first space that we were in, which was a donated space in downtown Iowa City. The organization was founded by a group of theater students at the University of Iowa who really just needed a space to perform a play that they had written and didn't have a space to do it, and were gifted this space temporarily. And this was 20 years ago. And over the course of essentially, I mean, I'm thinking about, I narrate the history of our organization a lot, and from many different lenses, and thinking about how maintaining community ultimately, is the reason that we exist now 20 years later, and have many more people involved. There have been a lot of changes in spaces and people, including me, and thinking about like, how has this happened? Feels like a magnet, to use a kind of funny metaphor, that sort of loses and gains power at different points, and maybe has, when you have a group of little magnets, and sometimes they sort of flop all over each other because there's negative and positive poles. But thinking about, this 20-year history of this space, which I'm just a small part of, and this community, because the space is nothing without the people in it. It's not a community, it's just a space. This is an image of one of our spaces that we have now, which is a white house built in the late 19th century on a little bit of a raised hill in downtown Iowa City. And in the image, there's a man with a beard on a porch talking into a microphone, actually probably saying poetry into a microphone, knowing who that is, and a group of people sitting, some on the ground, some in chairs, some people standing up, one person with a bicycle, holding onto a bicycle, all facing towards this man on the porch. And this is where we are now, and it just shows a different image of what the organization is. So thinking about how we maintain these spaces is another image of a prior space that we were in that was in a basement. It is a cinder block wall basement space with a blue linoleum floor. There's a group of people standing and talking to each other and sort of looking a little bit at some art installations, including a lit up box that has an image of a house. In the windows are images of people's faces, and then some other pieces of paper strung from the ceiling, also with images of people's faces in them. And so to say a little, if you are interested, I don't want to take a lot of time talking about what Public Space One does, because we do many things, including art exhibitions, workshops, hosting performances, all sorts, basically creating a space where people can share their creative work and their creative knowledge. And so if you're interested, you can go to our website, publicspaceone.com, or our Instagram, which I can share the link to as well, which actually has more images than the website if you'd like to look at images. So thinking about these, how we're maintaining community, it's, you know, as an organization doesn't have to have a space, but that's for us as a creative community, having this space and making it a place that is a community space, that's not, that is maybe, and in a lot of cases, a space that wasn't a community space before, but has been opened up to be a place where anyone in the community can come and show artwork or learn an art skill or share the art skill that they have, is one of the strategies that we're using for maintaining community. And I think, you know, all the spaces that we've been in have been different sizes, have had different challenges to make them accessible, to make them visible, and to use them for the sort of things that artists and community members, when we talk about artists at Public Space One, we're talking about everyone, because humans are innately creative. So artists of all kinds who want to use the space for their projects. We also are working on creating temporary spaces because art can be something that, if you don't feel like it is, for so many reasons, people have barriers that prevent them from participating in creative projects or engaging with art because they don't feel like it belongs to them, or they don't understand it, or for so many different reasons. And so we also create temporary spaces. And these two images are an example of a project that we did that was many years ago, an inflatable pyramid shaped. So this image on the left is a giant plastic inflatable pyramid that's right next to a sort of a glass sided skyscraper building. And then on the right is an image of people sitting on the ground, and some kids standing inside of the pyramid and doing sort of sound art piece. So some people have radios and speakers and are sort of sitting in a line, and then also looking up, and it sort of looks like the inside of a light box. And so this is an example of a temporary space that we've made, and this changed who our community was that day, because we put it in a place that's very central to downtown Iowa City. It was surprising and weird, and so it engaged people in a different way than maybe thinking, oh, I'm going to go into an art gallery. This is an image of another temporary space that we had for longer, but was something that we did a pop-up in a more visible storefront space. And the image is take a photo taken at night in a window in another storefront, and it has wooden text hung from the top of the window that says the words near future, and then it has underneath that a line of prints hung from a string, and they're all the same print. They're blue printing on white paper, and they say stand up for each other, and next to the words are two sort of flowers that the petals have become patterns. This was a space that we did over the course of a couple of months, and again was thinking about, okay, how can we create a temporary space? This was just sort of an abandoned storefront that was vacant for a couple of months, where different kinds of community can form, and this space was really focused on art as political action, and so that also invited a different kind of community into it. So that's just, there's so it's difficult to narrow down talking about all these different spaces. So the first thing I want to share, though, is about creating these spaces maintaining them. And I'll talk a little bit later about how we think about not necessarily in an expert way, but just how we continue to think about time scale, I mentioned some of these spaces were temporary, and how, if you're using a space or trying to create a space for community, how like what the different time scales are and how that impacts a project in a community. But before I get to that, the second thing I wanted to share that we try to do, and I'll just reiterate that it's very, very much a process, and I feel not an expert, but I have experience in this small community that we're in, and by that I mean Iowa City. So one of the things that we try to do is continuously shift towards a collective model in a lot of different ways. So I have been involved with the organization for over a decade, but I and now am a staff member of the organization. For a long time, we did not have staff, but we are an organization that would not exist at all without volunteer labor and organizers. And in order to it's really important to us. A lot of arts organizations can have sort of a more hierarchical model where there are the staff who make decisions and then volunteers who just help with things, right? And don't necessarily have a say in making decisions. And we do this imperfectly, but very, very consistently create opening spaces where people can participate in decision making and help with everything, because it's we try to sort of flip the idea that a volunteer is just a helper, but that everyone is co-organizing and maintaining the space together. And that means both literally maintaining the space. So to describe the image that I have, this is a photograph of two people with their backs to the camera, and there's a green ladder in front of them, and they are painting a white wall in a sort of light green teal color. And this is an image of two of our co-organizers, volunteers, members. However, actually the terminology becomes important because it sometimes that it helps people feel more a part of the community, and they do have agency. These two folks working together to renovate this house that's now our community print studio. And so we invite people to be involved both in physically maintaining our spaces together. We could not do it without a large group of people, and then also to be involved in creative decisions. All of our gallery exhibitions that we curate in our gallery are decided by a volunteer group of people, some of whom have experience curating art shows and some of whom don't at all, but are just excited about that. Or maybe they're nervous about it and don't feel like they know, but have a voice because they've opted into being part of that group in making decisions as a community member about what we want to have in our gallery. So that's one example. Again, it's something that is a continuous process because it's natural the way that our society is set up to create these hierarchies and so that's something that I think about every single day and just try to keep doing. Our community print studio is also a place where we can share, start to shift hierarchies of who knows more teaching and learning. There are lots of skill shares. So this is a photograph of 6 people. You can just see the side of someone. And the 4 in the middle are all looking towards a sheet of paper that has blue ink on it that the person in the middle is holding. And in front of them is a metal bed that's part of a printing press. And in the background is a bulletin board and a bookshelf and lots of colors and prints and cassette tapes. This is an example of one of the many skill shares that happens in our community print studio, which is collectively run. And this space is really special because many techniques, there's sort of an idea of expertise. And of course, some people may know how to use equipment more than others, and that's a safety thing, and that's important. But also, we try to really create a space in the print studio where understanding that everyone has something to learn or to teach as well as learn. So it's not like a traditional educational system. And I want to make sure I'm not running over time. So this is a very, very difficult image description because it is a collage of, I think, like 12 or 16 photographs. And I actually am not going to describe them all. I'm sorry for that. But the reason that I show this is because I was thinking about this presentation. I was thinking about community and like, how do we represent community at Public Space One? And this is a slide that I've used before when it's just like, I jammed a bunch of photos on here. For those of you who need a description there, all of the photos have groups of people in them, and they're all jammed together in a way that makes it feel like there's even more people, and includes children who are wearing masks and leaping up and down, a guy with braids playing a banjo, a group of people looking at art on a wall, someone doing a video camera interview, a group of people standing around a table doing a printmaking activity together. And so when I present about Public Space One and what we do, I show things like this where it looks like, oh, there's people here all the time. Like, we're so busy all the time. And this is when I think about community and how we maintain it. This is, yesterday I was talking to my colleagues and thinking, actually, it's not like this all the time, and thinking about time and scale and how we gauge the success of a community sometimes by like, oh, so many people showed up to this event. But thinking about, I think Shelby and Perna were both talking about consistency and just presence. And so there are many days when there's not people in the space or people don't show up to an event, and what it means to keep maintaining community and creating other ways for people to connect, to know that we're going to be there, or that they can come there. And that it's okay to not be in a crowded space, that maybe actually it's wonderful for someone to be able to work alone in a studio if they need that, and thinking about that as a way to, it's difficult with resources and spaces often in so many communities, and this has been true for us, that space can be at a premium, and so how do you keep that available, knowing that sometimes emptiness is a part of, like, keeping that space there, even if it's empty, is really, really important as well. So I'm going to stop talking now because I feel like I've maybe even talked too long, and would love to, printmaking, turn it over to Q&A, and thank you for bearing with my very not scripted presentation.
Thank you so much, Kalmia. I'm realizing a thread that I'm just going to name as well of theater throughout the three practitioners, because Purna, you participate in community theater. Shelby, I understand that you have a theatrical background, and Kalmia, you were explaining how the start of PS1 was a group of theater students, and that's just very interesting to me. The other thing that I noticed between the three of you is you're spotlighted. Let's see, a spotlight. Add spotlight. Okay. The other thing that I noticed is what you hit on, Kalmia, of like, community is ongoing. It's a process. It's consistency. It's showing up. It's like maintaining the commitment to a group. And I think that that is a really, really interesting point that each of you have made in really different ways and holding different space for different communities. But so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing, all of you. This was awesome. If you have questions that you would like to put into the chat for practitioners, we can facilitate a few. You can also just throw all the questions into the chat and we can have practitioners respond to them via email, or we can just hold the questions collectively. So let me take a moment to go through, and also Kalmia, Shelby, or Purna, if you have any reflections after hearing one another, feel free to share that now as well.
Well, I'm seeing Michelle says, I love the idea of empty spaces or low attended events as still being successful, especially how that ties into accessibility needs. Example, an event with 1 or 2 attendees can be more accessible for people who can't be in crowded spaces. and allow for more intimate connection with the program. And I just wanted to say, I was also, as a space maker and creator, I think that's so valuable to talk about. And I'm so grateful that you included that in your presentation just now. In our work, I think it's really important to reframe the use of accommodations. Like, we built this thing, and we're trying this new skill set, and we're introducing this new thing, and we noticed that nobody used it. And I just want to reframe that that's not a loss. Again, it just goes back to recreating it as much as possible. And then when you have those smaller events, you get to talk one-on-one more. And then those people will share it with their networks. And then suddenly you have this practice that's probably going to pop up at other events outside of your organization, and be utilized in new ways. And then it takes on a life of its own. So I just am so grateful that we're reframing. And I also think it's like anti-capitalist too, to be like, we don't need huge numbers and like, all these things, like small is good. Sometimes small is all. So I'm super grateful for that, and I will stop talking.
This is a question that was in the chat, I think from you, Lauren, if you feel like expanding on it, but you shared, I'm curious to know tips on navigating consensus in the context of Purna's repair cafes. It is not always hard to put everyone on the same page to how to do things, even when there is a clear goal.
Yeah, just to clarify, it's not always easy, rather, to navigate consensus, since you all are facilitating and creating these spaces in which you're putting people together. Yeah, I would love to hear more of your role as facilitators, really, and how you honor group consensus, which I know that many of us struggle with.
So can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So, well, as Lauren said, it's very difficult to reach, and I have actually worked in the same field in a formal sector and informal sector. So when I say formal sector, in a formal organization where boss is the head and you have to actually fall in consensus with him, whatever he or she is saying. But in an informal way of working, or a loose network, so often we land up in a dead end, means we are not going anywhere, and everybody stops talking because we know that we are not heading together, and then you have to basically compromise, and you have to take the minimum which everybody has agreed, and then you take one step at a time. As Shelby has said, small is beautiful, small is good, small is nice. So I think that is really important, rather than, because the collectiveness doesn't remain, you have to really build it up. The consensus, you have to build it up over a period of time. It doesn't happen like that, because every person is different. And not everybody is wrong, and not everybody is right.
Thank you so much. Any other thoughts on navigating group decision-making and consensus? Yeah,
I can share just something small. This is Kalmia speaking, that something that I've started to learn more recently is I think consensus decision-making is really beautiful and important. And also we've learned that in our community, being a part of this, like being asked to be a part of every decision, can also be like very overwhelming for people and make them feel like it's too much. Like, as an art space, we have people who are, who are there all the time, really using the space heavily. And then people for whom it's like, I come every 6 months and I really love the event that I go to. And so this is just sort of a place that I stop in and I value, but it's not, a core part of my life. And so understanding that, and we continue to learn this, that inviting people into that decision-making process is really important, to continually and consistently do that, but also realizing and remembering that, like, that people saying no to that doesn't mean that, or that you should let people say no to that, and that it means that there's space for people to be a part of the community in many different ways, as long as they know that they can participate in that. Let them say no as well. As we've grown as an organization, that's become increasingly important because not everyone wants to be part of every conversation and decision. It's been funny in some cases, people are like, please don't ask me. I don't care.
Thank you for sharing. Ooh, and M put in a decision-making resource. So thank you so much. We'll definitely include that in the takeaway document. And Mary shares, Shelby, I appreciate the accessibility guides and accommodations for events, meeting spaces. I'm a disabled designer working for a government agency where we have to adhere to 508 compliance standards for all of our graphics, presentations, documents, etc. The striking thing for me, actually, can we pause there and do a little teach if anyone doesn't know what that means? The 508 compliance standards. I don't know what it means. Would someone be able to share?
I'm happy to, unless Mary, you would like to talk about your work, which I'm really excited to be in the presence of. I'll give you a second.
Of
Mary.
course, and I can give a very brief explanation because 508 compliance is something that I've had to learn about through this role that I've started within the past year in working for a government agency. So 508 compliance, and I can add some links into the chat as well on this, is, you know, when we're producing documents, you know, Word documents, PDFs, PowerPoint presentations, when we're hosting webinars, these are all the sort of like, it's like ADA, but for documents and graphics and things like that. So it's making sure you have alt text. It's making sure that, you know, we produce a lot of maps, and accessibility for maps is, you know, quite complicated, but important. And what's striking for me as someone who has a design background, I have 2 design degrees, and this was something that was never discussed in design school, but it's something that is now I'm learning on the job. You know, it's about making sure your color contrast, you know, is the right ratio. So it's so striking to me to hear all of these presentations and think about, I think there's so much we think about with the physical environment and making it accessible. And I just appreciate these other thoughts. I'm just hoping that something that, you know, more people can start to think about in you know, we have digital spaces of accessibility too. So Shelby, I was just, you know, kind of reflecting on a lot of what you were saying there about, like, you know, how can we even just like make a meeting space more accessible, and like give people the expectations of what to expect and things like that. But I can put some links in the chat for like the government's definition, the federal government's definition for 508 compliance and stuff like that.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Mary. Yeah, so accessibility should innervate absolutely everything we do, and it should be applied to every output that we create. And I think what you're talking about is actually a holdover from disability history, which is that for much of the US's history and the global history of disability inclusion, disabled people have been isolated to institutions, or physically haven't been able to access space. That issue continues, both issues continue today. And so what we have is just this kind of assumption that disabled people won't be the people that will be reading maps or that will be implementing an architectural design plan. And so we haven't made literally every step of the process as accessible as possible. So that's certainly a huge undertaking, is to go back and make everything we do accommodative. And that's why everyone needs to play their part and to try and think through like, okay, this is what I do in my everyday. How am I including disabled people in this? And if you don't have an answer yet, that's an invitation. And you can usually Google, like, Google isn't fantastic for giving accessibility answers, but you can usually find a few places to start. There's something else I was going to say, but it's insignificant, I guess. Thank you so much, Mary.
Thank you so much. Well, I want to just give it back to Kalmia, Shelby, and Purna if you have anything else to share before we wrap up. We would love to stay in conversation with all of you about this. As you know, the maintainers is in process. I put in the chat meta maintenance, but we are constantly in this moment of how can the maintainers, I'm really excited to dig into this information, but also just how can we maintain a community and a sense of connection with all of you. So yeah, anything else to share before we wrap up?
No, I was wanting to say that even in, see, I am from an engineering background. Even in our college, in our studies, we have not taught about how to make building accessible. So actually, I don't know, by design, it is missing from everywhere. Even in our country, we are still struggling for the law in place. I mean, there is some law in place, but people are, I mean, we as a normal people are also not very conscious about these needs. So I guess now, since all these things are being spoken about, I think the time is, it's improving, you know, people are becoming more conscious. I mean, I don't blame them, but nobody is knowing about it, you know, that, okay, you know, they have these needs, so so I guess things will open up now. I think so, I mean, at least.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I feel really grateful to each of you, and thank you so much to everyone for coming. Again, this was the second event in the Moving Toward Maintenance event series. The third event in the series this year will be Moving Toward Maintaining Movements. This event is still in process, so if you have thoughts and ideas, feel free to send them our way, and we will of course be in touch via Twitter, Instagram, listserv, and the quarterly newsletter. And so in terms of wrapping up this event, I'll put in some links in our chat here for how you can stay involved with the maintainers. We will be then pushing out this event recording, the event takeaway document, all the resources that Kalmia, Purna, and Shelby have shared, along with the information from this chat. So nothing is lost right now. We're just continuing to build and maintain community. So thank you so much. We're so grateful. Thank you again to Max, our captioner. And yeah, I hope you all take care and have some time for rest.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you.